we'll go ahead and get started. And I want to begin by sharing a few things about the four-corner exercise, which I had in front of me, and now, okay. So the four-corner exercise is, I don't know how many of you have done this already, but you were asked to write three things in each of the corners of your paper. And one of those corners, the upper left-hand corner, was 3 American values. And so as you look at this, and this is something that you can use with groups that you're involved with. Now think about the things that you wrote down when you think about 3 American values. And they may be things like honesty, family, hardworking. As you look at the things that you wrote down, ask yourself, is there a theme in the things that you wrote down? Is your theme more individualistic? Is your theme more community oriented? And are your words or is your theme inclusive of people of many different cultural groups? In the upper right-hand corner, you were to write down things, the American things. And I know a lot of times when I do this, people will write down baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, things like that. What is it about your experience that made you write the things that you did? And were the things that you wrote down more material kinds of things, or did they reflect the state of being, happiness, peacefulness, rich, spiritual? What kinds of things did you put down there? Were they technological oriented? In the third corner, near the bottom, you were to write 3 American people. What kinds of people did you think of? Were the people that you wrote down family, friends, colleagues, popular people, entertainers, people you wish you could be like? The people you write down reflect diversity, ethnic, gender, religious diversity. Who are the people that you wrote down? So you're looking for themes in these areas. The last one in the bottom right-hand corner, right-hand corner, characteristics that make you American. What are those things that make you American? Independence, being precise in terms of time, Christianity. You know, what were those kind of things that you put down that make you an American? I want you to also to think about, when you look at your responses, do they reflect all the Americas? The American countries, of course, are in North America, Central America, and South America, since the term America was used. So your answers, were they inclusive of all the Americas? The things that you wrote down typically represent the way you see the world. So if you choose to use this exercise with other people, think about, have them go through this exercise, look for various themes, and then share those themes with one another and see what are the differences, what are the similarities in those things. So that gives you some idea of that particular exercise, the four-corner exercise. So right now, we're going to have facilitators share a little bit about their journey. And we're going to go in alphabetical order, the first name. So, Amy.
All right. Some of you know me from previous sessions. I'm Dr. Amy White. I did not grow up in this country. So I came here full time when I was 14 years old. And quickly, when I was growing up, I mean, although I'm English by birth, my mother was American, my father was English, and you know, I mean, talk about colonizers, you know, completely. But it's the racial dynamics are a bit different there. So when I came here, I found out that I was put in the Black school. I didn't know there was any type of a difference. So, you know, I was the minority. But I found out that, you know, the small group of white people in the school still adopted some attitudes that I really wasn't used to. So it took me quite a long time to really understand why this was so, and like started investigating the history of, you know, structural racism in the United States and things like this, to kind of understand why there was quite some different attitudes. But my path to social activism actually comes through the LGBTQ community. I ran an LGBTQ nonprofit for several years. And, but I mean, if we know anything in movements, if they don't recognize intersectionality, you know, they're no good in many ways. So, you know, justice has just been something very close to my heart for a while. I had a bit of an awakening when I was 17 years old. My grandfather, who was American here, died, and he was someone I looked up to, I respected, I thought he was a great guy, etc. And when we went to clean out, you know, his old things, etc., we found a Klan uniform in one of the boxes. And I still can't put together what I thought about him and finding that. And it is something that's been a bit of a lifelong struggle for me to understand and come to terms with. So I guess that's kind of a long, meandering answer to how I got here, but and why it has some passion for me.
Thank you, Amy. I guess I'm next. Since both of our names start with A. My first experience with racism at a very emotional level was actually when I was in college. But I want to share my experiences here in Zanesville. I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. My K through 12 years were primarily with other Black students. The year I graduated from college was also the year I married Mr. Jerry Jackson. And our wedding day was one of the happiest days of my life. Soon after that, we came to Zanesville. Jerry had already been working in Zanesville at the time, and he had a one-room apartment on the second floor of the community center on West Main. But that would not suffice for the two of us. So we began looking for a place to live together. For weeks, we called around. We called a lot of different people who had places for rent. And they would say, sure, come take a look. And as soon as we arrived, we heard every story in the book about why they could not rent to us. Whoa. It was heartbreaking. And I could see right through all their vain excuses. I was hired to, at that time, to teach, starting in the Zanesville City Schools. And school was actually about to start, and we didn't even have a place to live. Well, eventually, I mean, we obtained an apartment, but after a month, we were told to leave because the owner was being threatened by his neighbors for renting the apartment to Black people. Initially, I think growing up in Cleveland, I felt hatred just coming from people for something that seems so stupid. I mean, skin color. You don't even know who I am. You don't even want to take time to know who I am. Stupid. So my first thought was, let me hit you. Let me beat you up so I can give you a real reason to not like me.
Oh,
But my parents taught me better than that. And I needed to display the godly qualities, excuse me, qualities that they had taught me. I realized that I grew up in an environment where I was truly valued and nurtured as a person simply because I was a person, simply because I was me. There's a Ubuntu saying from South Africa, I am because you are, and because you are, I am. And this saying embraces the idea that humans cannot exist in isolation. We depend on connection, community, and caring. If you spew hatred, then none of us can be truly human. If you live a philosophy of life that tells you that you're superior than another group of people, then we cannot connect, and none of us can be truly human. When you devalue others, you devalue yourself. Well, Jerry and I found another place to live on Pershing Avenue. Then Jerry was drafted into the military. While he was away, a guy broke into my house and I reported it to the police. I was assigned an attorney, had an appointment to see him. He asked me what happened. And so I told him, this person broke into my house. And he said, well, that's not the story I heard. I was surprised. It was like, okay, well, what did you hear? He told me what he had heard. And I asked, well, who do you believe? Are you going to represent me? And he just looked at me and he said, well, it's your word against his. And I said, yeah, oh, okay. Are you going to represent me? And all he kept repeating was, well, it's just your word against his. Well, it didn't look like much was going to happen, so I left. And I later found out that the guy that broke into my house had a cousin on the police force. That after I reported him to the police, he went to his cousin and he and the police officer made up a whole different story. So essentially, the police colluded together to refute my report. I was done. I was, Gary had to go to Vietnam and I went back to Cleveland. When Jerry was discharged from the military, he had a job waiting for him in Zanesville. So although I wanted to stay in Cleveland, we came back to Zanesville. After a couple of years, we moved to the outskirts of town on Twin Hills Drive, where we spent 49 years, and I loved the wide open spaces and all the land that we had. However, the first few years were really very difficult. Initially, there was a petition sent around for folks to sign to prevent the realtor from selling the house to us. But he sold it to us anyway. He was being investigated by the NAACP. We had pets. Some of our dogs were shot and killed. It didn't do any good to report the killings to the police. least we felt at that time, because after the first couple of times of reporting and the police never called back, tell us anything, we felt, why bother? It was really hard at that time telling our children that someone killed their pet. We even had one of our ponies shot. The vet came out and assisted him, so the pony lived. Now, I don't want to belabor this point, but those are just a few of the stories of my introduction to Zanesville. And you know the saying, first impressions make lasting impressions. So it took a long time, a lot of soul searching, personal soul searching, to see above those experiences and see the richness of the culture here in Muskingum County. But really, those experiences should have never happened. Humans have existed for thousands of years without racism. Although we humans can find almost anything to devalue another person, racism has not always existed, so we can eliminate it if we choose to do so. And I have chosen to do whatever I can, large or small, to eliminate it. And that is why during the 18 years I taught in Zanesville, I added a lot of things about African and African American culture to my teaching. That is why I studied cultural groups. That is why I've traveled to so many different places. That's why I taught among many other courses, of course, on multicultural counseling, 16 years at Kent State University in the counseling department, and developed an advanced course that focused on cultural counseling skills. That's why I've been involved with the Nelson T. Gant Foundation in Zanesville to help others see the richness of African American culture and the historical and the socio-political realities that have existed since the establishment of this country that too often get ignored, especially in our educational upbringing. That is why I want to help all of you to see the myth that we're living in and to destroy it and see the truth. That's why I encourage each of you to take up the challenge, stay in it, persevere, because we are all hurt by it. And if we truly desire to love one another, we won't let all the pain and suffering continue. There are white people all over the country now recognizing the structural racism. If, as a white person, you don't see how racism hurts you, read the book, Your Blues Ain't Like Mine by B.B. Moore Campbell. Also, Joe Fagan's article on systemic racism and its white racial frame notes that 20 to 30 trillion dollars in Black economic losses have occurred due to slavery, Jim Crow, and present-day discrimination. That's money that could have been contributed to the economy of the United States. We're all hurt by racism. Anti-racism work requires knowing our U.S. history, systemic racism in our history. So that's a little bit of my story. Thank you. Danielle.
Thanks. I have to follow Anita, right? It's a great story. So as many of you know, and many of you may not know, I'm actually from Michigan, actually Battle Creek, Michigan, which is where all the cereal is made, where all the Kellogg's and Post factories are located. And I started out at a 7-day Adventist school, kindergarten through 3rd grade. I went to 7-day Adventist school. The school was actually pretty diverse. My kindergarten teacher was Hispanic. We learned everything in English and Spanish. There were Black and brown and white students. And so I had no idea, right? I'm like, oh, this is just regular life. 4th grade, I went to public school. And I ended up going to an elementary school that was predominantly white. And so there I was like, oh, I'm different, right? I'm different than some of these people. However, it was very welcoming for the most part. I participated in sports. I was welcomed, I was included. And then when I went to middle school, I went to the school that was considered the Black school, the urban school. And then when I went there, at first I wasn't welcome. I was too white to be Black. I was in AP classes, so I was too smart. So I wasn't accepted by my peers there, and I didn't understand that. And my grandmother, who was an advocate in the community, she worked for a community reentry program called Strive. She was my everything. She passed away from sickle cell in 2004. But she sat me down and she had a conversation with me, and she explained to me that because I am an African-American woman, young lady, I will always have to be better than, twice as good, twice as smart, twice as driven as anyone else. And I didn't understand, and I was upset. I'm like, why aren't these are my friends, these are my peers, they're calling me white. I didn't understand. And so I had this conversation as a 7th grader. And I remember feeling like, what is happening? My world is falling apart. I don't understand this. And so it took me a couple of years, but when I got into high school, I got into an Upward Bound program, a TRIO program. And in that program is where I found my racial salience, right, and who I was. And my program director, who is still to this day one of my mentors, and still the director of that program at my old high school, she helped me see that it didn't matter. The experiences I had mattered, but I needed to use those to move past it and to help others. Because she kept saying, look at how far you've come. You are in all AP classes, you're visiting these colleges. When I was a senior, I had all these scholarships and all these different things offered. And she said, and I couldn't see all those things because I was still stuck in this, but people don't accept me, my skin is Black, but they tell me I'm not Black enough. And she helped me understand through those 4 years of high school that you are who you are, you're an amazing person, you are an African American, you're intelligent, you can do anything you want to do, you can be just as successful as these other people. And she always took us to places where we saw ourselves reflected in the leadership, where we saw ourselves being in those positions, and people that look like us, and people who could speak to being first generation low income students who are now CEOs. She would take us to Broadway plays for Upward Bound Trio field trips, and we would get to sit and learn etiquette dinners and all these different things that we never got exposed to. And so through being in that program and going through those experiences in my K through 12 formative years, I started to understand that the world is so much bigger than Battle Creek, Michigan. However, this idea of racism is everywhere, because every time she took us somewhere and we would get to talk to a Black CEO or a Hispanic, person in leadership, they always shared the fact of what they had gone through and what they still endured, even being in those positions. And so at a very young age, I decided someone helped me, and someone stood for me and explained to me and taught me my worth, and it was my duty to pay it forward. So after I graduated, I went, to school. I got into college access work, and college access work, of course, especially I worked for a federally funded program called Gear Up. I was a project director of Gear Up in Michigan at Thayer State University for 5 years. And through that, I worked with families and students who were low socioeconomic status, and I started working with young African-American women. And even before that, when I worked at the community college in my hometown for 4 years, and I had a program called College is Possible for young students. And then I had a Sisters of Success group for young African-American girls, where I basically sewed into them and helped them understand the things that I had to understand too late, that I wanted them to understand earlier. And it just became, for me, a way of life. It became that I have been through things and I want to share that with others. I want to help other students to understand, to see their worth, to see their value, to understand that, yes, you may be a person of color in this country, but that does not mean that you cannot achieve the things that you want to achieve. You may have to take a different route. You may have to work a little bit harder, but you absolutely have people in your corner who care about you. And as I've moved here to Zanesville, I've met people here who have said, please sow into our youth in Zanesville, because they just need to know that somebody cares. Somebody cares whether they make it or they don't make it. Somebody's going to hold them accountable for that A or that D that they get. And sometimes that can make all the difference. And so I want my young people of color to know that college is possible. Anything is possible for them if they want to do it, and that there are ways to do things. And I want them to learn what racism looks like, but how to not let racism define them. Because I had to learn how to not let racism define me. I'm an African-American woman first and foremost, but I am all the other things that I am made up of. And those things are what help me thrive and keep going and make connections so that I can make sure I pay it forward for as long as I can. And so that's where I came from, and that's why I'm here, and why I hope to continue to do what I'm doing here and in other places moving forward.
Thank you, Danielle, for sharing that. I forgot I was muted. Tony.
Okay, I'm last. I'll make it short. I'll utilize the rest of the time until 8:30. A little bit about my background. Many of you, though, my last name is Male, and if you haven't been familiar or are not familiar with the last name, I'm sure you will, just utilizing a little research. My experience with racism. Gosh, it started at an early age. Racism was one of the key components of my parents separating. My father was African-American, or is African-American. My mother was white. She passed away some years ago, but I remember they had so many issues being an interracial couple in Morgan County, where I'm from and still reside, that they actually had to go to Tennessee to become married and be a family. And like I said, the racism, not just from the community, but also within my mother's family. There were family members that did not allow myself and my sister to enter their household because we were biracial. And like I said, you look at me, I have a light skin tone. And I'll remind you, any of you know W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois once said, being a light complected African American can be a curse. And one of the reasons it can be a curse because whites, and of course also darker skinned African American, do not realize that you identify as being black. So throughout the years I heard many things, but to start early on in education, I'm sure many of you were, but kids can be cruel. And it started out at a young age of being called the N-word in school, in Morgan County school system. And it progressed to being beat up for talking or wanting to date white girls, and being shamed, not just for my race, but for my weight as well. And I remember one thing really vividly, when my mother she was really protective of myself and my sister. And I remember one time that she took all the channels she had to do in regards to the discrimination I was going through in school. And she went, like I said, a proper channel. Well, she knew the person who was doing this, and she knew the family. They literally lived 2 blocks from us. And I remember her, back then we had phone books. I remember her calling her one night, and I was in the living room. She was in the kitchen on the phone. And I remember her telling this mother what her son was doing to me. And before that, I loved education. After that, I became a social anxiety type person that did not want to leave the house. And it took many years. But I remember her on the phone vividly telling her what was going on. And I remember her getting off the phone bawling. And this mother, told her that we were just a bunch of in-lovers. And again, I hate using the word. It's been used so many times throughout my life that just using the word makes me cringe. So, I mean, it started out at the early age. And if it wasn't for, and I met this person at Denison University when I wanted to attend there many years ago. If it wasn't for Spike Lee's Malcolm X movie coming out in 1992, that really shook me and made me do deep research in regards to Malcolm X and other African-American leaders at that time. Of course, I knew about Martin Luther King, but I dug further. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would be the person I am today. And after that, I kept pushing and wanted to be that social activist in the community. And not just in regards to Black lives or racism. It was also, I wanted to become more familiar with other cultures. One of my best friends and mentor from undergrad was Dr. Shada Shervani. She's from Iran, and I wanted to learn so much more about Islam. Islam has such a bad persona in the United States from so many people. I wanted to learn more about that. And one of my friends is Amish. I wanted to learn about the Amish lifestyle. So not only was I fighting for myself and my race, but I also wanted to fight of people of other cultural backgrounds and understand. I've talked to my group many weeks about the term empathy. And so I wanted to understand what they were going through and how they got there. And you'd be surprised how many people want to talk. After high school, I was the first in my family to graduate high school. And many of you know, I'm now finishing up my PhD, knock on wood, finishing up my PhD in counseling. So in the counseling, I went into that because I wanted to help people. And I stayed in Morgan County, and many friends and family members have told me to leave Morgan County, leave the racism. If you're not aware, we're right now in a heated discussion about finally changing our school mascot. What's named after General Hunt Morgan, a Civil War Confederate general who went through Morgan County ravishing and murdering and pillaging his way through in our mascot. I remember when I was in school in the 90s, the mascot still carried a Confederate flag. So we talk about Confederate flag. That's something that I see so often here. I can drive 2 blocks away and see Confederate flags flying. And to me, that brings up many painful memories of Connie Norman is also a great friend of mine. And once the president of the NAACP, I remember calling her so much that we became really close. And of course, we're also family, but we became really close because she became a person to fight for local causes in Morgan County. And then we have Henry Burke. If you haven't heard of the name, please research them. So it took the elders actually, and as well as civil rights leaders to bring me out of the hole I was falling into. And I feel really concerned and horrible that many African-American children do not have that opportunity. So that's why I stayed in Morgan County. I want to stay to embrace the community, because not all the community is bad. We have so many allies now that I never would have guessed that are coming out, the white allies, I should say, that are coming out. And if you're familiar with Blacks in Appalachia or African-Americans in Appalachia, we tend to be very quiet. My father used to say, work for the county garage, that he experienced racism the entire time he worked there, but his words were, we don't want to rock the boat. We have a job. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to run it. So it took many years of working under these conditions till he finally developed symptoms, heart disease and anxiety, and finally had to retire early. But he never got promoted or nothing. And so I took it upon myself not only to become educated and aware, but also to be an activist. I've had my life threatened many times. If I die for a cause I believe in. So that's why I encourage all of you, we're going to talk eventually at the end of this, not just to be non-racist, but to be anti-racist, to speak up. I've told you, many of you before, that I've had college presidents look at me and their words were, you're not Black. So I have to stand there and have an educated discussion with them of not just about the community you live in regards to mixed race and so on and so forth, but about the African-American culture in general. And I use a simplistic example that even though we classify Asians as Asians, all Asians as Asian and all Hispanics as Hispanic, they don't all look the same. They come in many shades and dialects and subcultures, if you will. So you have to continue to educate. You have to. And that's why I agreed to do this with Nita. I hope we can do it in multiple counties. We've been asked to do something similar in Athens County. Morgan County is trying to push for it by a good friend of mine, Mr. Hopkins. So we have to do this. We have to have these uncomfortable discussions, but we also have to keep adding allies. This has to be the time. This changes. It's been 55 years, I tell my students when I lecture, 55 years since the Civil Rights Act was passed. We might be that, I'm not going to point out your age, but we might be at that age, or we might have mothers, grandparents. So it had not been that long. So this is the time that we need to stop. But we can't just change the views of few. We have to change the system. Without the system, nothing will change permanently. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. Now, at this time, we want to just share our reflections on the past few sessions that we've had. So if each of the facilitators would just maybe give a brief comment, we'll make it brief so we can go into our group. Maybe one or two words that describe some of the your reflections of the past few sessions that we've had. Anyone want to start?
Well, I've been encouraged by the education that has happened, by the awareness that has taken place, some of the enlightenment that has happened in some of our sessions, and the connections that have been made in some of these sessions between participants and attendees. And I'm hoping that we move forward with this, and that this is not the end of our conversations, and that we can take some action steps to continue this work.
Thank you, Danielle. We'll be talking more about where we go from here later on. Anyone else? Amy or Tony?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. One, I was pleasantly surprised with the participation and with the connections. And some of the sessions, like the last one we had, were eye-opening to see how much we still need to do. And I really hope this isn't another one of those things where, you know, there's nothing that continues on from this. So I think it's important that we now go and we do become anti-racist and we do things. Like, you know, Tony said, now is the time.
Thank you, Amy. Tony?
Well, I talked so much recently. I would just say I'm honored to know all of you. And I am hopeful that, and that's the main word I want to use is hopeful, but I'm hopeful that we'll all continue this journey. And I want to quote my friend, I believe she's on tonight, Monica Jones. Her and I would talk about this whole thing being a movement. And her response was, no, it's a moment. And a moment can last forever and impact so many. So I say thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Tony. And I will just kind of ditto what a lot of you have said. And one of the things was the awareness about our history in terms of structural racism, growth has occurred during these sessions, and particularly with the resources that we have and people reading and sharing those resources and really taking a look at the structural racism that exists in our society all the way back from the formation of the United States. So that awareness piece, I think there's still a lot of work we still have to do in terms of policies, in terms of structural racism. Again, this has not always existed in human history. And so we can change, and we just have to make that commitment to do so. We have a lot of people here that are committed, and I guess my prayer is that we will continue and take on the challenge of what we see happening all over the nation in terms of addressing this issue. Okay, I think probably at this time, unless any of the facilitators have any other statements you want to make, we'll go into our small groups, and then we're going to come back and talk a little more about some of the things that we hope we can do, as well as things that we want to, some ideas we have, and perhaps some of you have some ideas also in terms of moving forward. Okay. What was I saying? Oh, shoot.
It literally ended with you saying the most important thing for us to remember is, and we cut out.
Oh, okay. To keep moving on. Stay in this. Don't
Yeah.
just, because this is the fourth session. Don't just go away and think this is the end. There's a lot of work to do. So stay connected with us as the facilitators, stay connected with the library, stay connected with the people in your group, stay connected with the organizations that you represent, and challenge them to continue to do more. I think that's what I was going to say. All right.
That's awesome.
So are we, okay, are we all back in?
Uh,
Some of us. Most of us, I guess.
We are. No, I think we're all here.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, we have 15 minutes and, oh gosh, we have a lot of, several other things to share real quick. I hope your discussions have been fruitful. One of the things we wanted to focus on in our discussions is where do we go from here? What are you committed to do? Because we don't want this to end. We don't want to walk away and do nothing. We want to have some plans in place. So we have Amy, who's going to talk a little bit about a 21-day challenge. I want to remind you that if you have not taken the test assessment online, to go ahead and do that. That'll help us give some feedback in terms of how you have progressed through these 4 weeks. And Stephanie also has some things to share. So before we run out of time, Amy, do you want to go ahead with what you are going to do?
Sure. I just sent a file again. It's just a little document I put together that is especially directed at other white people of, what to do next. But one thing that I think is particularly helpful is the 21-day racial equity habit breaking challenge. So what it does is it challenges you, and you can do it as an individual, although I think it's more effective in a group. Do you have a group of friends that you can do this with? Do you have a workplace that you could do this with? Do you have a church that you can do this with? Challenge everyone to do this. It's completely free. There's a lot of resources online, but it challenges you every day to do one of these to make anti-racism a habit in your life. Like every day you listen or read or reach out, or it gives this list of things and you have a little checklist to make sure you've done one of them every day. Because, we are creatures of habit. Like there's been a heck of a lot of research that says, say, if you go to the gym, it's like the first 10 times that matter the most. If you can just do this so it's a habit, so it's just part of your life, that you will keep doing it. So it just says for 21 days, do one of these things every day. And if you can have a group doing this and then come together and talk about your experience, I think would be even more effectual. And I give some other suggestions on here. The Racial Healing Handbook that has practical activities to do. The book White Fragility has an educator's resource that you can have a book group and lead discussions on some of this, very fundamental reading. And we've given you a lot of book suggestions and readings. And then we talked about this in my breakout session a little bit, but Standing Up for Racial Justice is an organization. They have a chapter in Athens. They have a chapter in Columbus. The chapter in Athens is really active. Get involved. Have a base from which you can have a little more power too. There is not a chapter in Zanesville. Something to keep in mind. Maybe it's time for one. So, and then I also have on here, if you're an educator, given that our session on education, some of it was more directed at COVID because it's so pressing right now, but I give some resources for educators to help, you know, teach anti-racism pretty much right away. So, you know, I think this is a good step for people to do. And so I challenge you to the challenge.
All right, thank you, Amy. And I just want to mention a couple of books. I know Amy had several books on her list of what she was just now talking about. Sometimes when we think of racism, we think of how, in some ways, how it hurts people of color. And you've heard me several times say it hurts everyone. And this is a book. Something. This book, I'll put it on the list too. Your Blues Ain't Like Mine by B.B. Moore Campbell. When you read this, you can see very clearly how racism hurts everybody. Okay, then also there was another that was mentioned, and I think it had a mistake in the title, but Ta-Nehisi's Coates book, Between the World and Me, there was another word in here, I don't remember what it was now, but the book is actually Between the World and Me. And it's about a father talking to his son and helping to prepare him for the world today. And then another book, I think I might have mentioned this one before, it's similar to White Fragility, but it's also written by a white man, Paul Kivel, Uprooting Racism. And he gives some real good examples of how people can work for racial justice. And then I have my own book, Letters to Friends, Wisdom Through Storytelling. Now, earlier when we started off our session today, the four facilitators were sharing their stories. And by sharing stories, you can learn a lot about a person, about what their struggles are and how they have overcome their struggles. And this book is just filled with people from many different cultural backgrounds, sharing their story, what they did in their lives. There are people from many different ethnic groups, gender, gay, lesbian, bisexual, gender, or sexual orientation. There are older people, younger people. There are folks in here who have been in prison, people who have been homeless. So their stories are all in here. Letters to Friends. And if you need a book, contact me. Okay, one last one. Dear White America. Is this showing up on your screen the right way or is it backwards? The right way? Okay.
It's the right way.
Okay, because I'm looking at it and the words look like they're all backwards. This is by Tim Wise. He's written a lot about racial issues, but this book is an excellent one. Dear White America. Okay. Stephanie, you had some things to share.
Yes. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
He has a whole list of events coming up.
Okay, can everybody see it? All right, so the library, we want to continue community conversations and expand the conversations beyond race. Our adult services team is working on one in September about voting, so appropriate at this time of year. And then we have a library committee working on a fake news program and how to find correct information. So news literacy will be helpful. That'll be a panel session on October 13th at 6:30, and that'll be a Zoom session as well. In November, we're working with the health department on a smoking and vaping session. And then we want to keep this going in 2021. So our goal right now, and right now it's all online, will be to do community conversations about topics like poverty, homelessness, race again, climate change, just those conversations where you don't have any comfortable place to go and talk to people that you don't know. I mean, for most of these conversations, I've only talked to my bubble. We had that challenge in our breakout session today is I only talked to my bubble about race. Who else do I talk to? So we're hoping to do this and to partner again with these wonderful partners. And then someone reached out to me, I believe it was Pam, and then someone else mentioned it in the chat today about book clubs. The team is also preparing a book club in November on a book situated around race, whether it's White Fragility, Between the World and Me, Slammed. So there's a lot of other, a lot of books out there. We haven't figured it out just yet, but that will be coming. So keep an eye on our website. And then in the chat, I've sent links about our resources about race, even after this event. And the recordings are posted on the community conversations link. So I'll send to that again. But if you have friends, family, people you don't know that you need to find a way to share this, the recordings are there. So we recorded the first part of every session, but not the breakout rooms, and that's available. And then I just told Anita internally, our staff at the library, because we want to make sure that we are supporting our community and our staff. We do monthly community conversations and training with staff to build empathy and understanding. We're doing this with poverty and homelessness, but we want to expand it and then work on diversity-based programming to our community and building more collections and programs to support the minorities in Muskingum County. And then our goal is to maybe work with other government organizations and nonprofits about training and recruiting, hiring diverse candidates. Lastly, I want to share this resource from Tom and Christine Croyle, who sent it to me, I think after the first session of their, and Christine, if you want to jump in, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I'll just do a quick summary and you can add into it. But they worked as a neighborhood group to find out ways that they could all work together to support anti-racism endeavors. So here's some ideas they had. They have a little free library. So they started trying to find books of color or books with characters of color to add to their little free library. They are doing neighborhood movies. And so what better way to discuss than through movies? Doing book groups with their neighborhood. I want to live in this neighborhood, by the way, if I can. And then one of the other things that I really love that they came up with this list is they want to support Black-owned businesses in Muskingum County, because not only should you support local, but you should support your Black-owned businesses. So they create a small list that they went out and did the research. I've done it. It's hard to find it, of Black-owned businesses. So I'm happy to share this information. But yeah, so thanks, Tom and Christine, for that awesome idea. There's plenty, Black and minority-owned businesses, I should say. And then the idea of maybe doing some of those yard signs and window decals right here. I've seen these around Columbus a lot that are just signs that show that you're a household who has empathy and that you care, and that people can feel comfortable having an ally there. And working on some other resources as well. So thank you guys for coming up with all that. I can't believe all the great stuff that you have going on. I'll leave that on the screen for others to read as well. But yeah.
Will this be sent out to these resources sent to the participants?
Yeah, it will. And
Okay.
then you can all work on it in your neighborhoods too.
Okay. Having those book discussions are really, really beneficial, because people read the books and they get into a lot of really good discussion. And bringing about change. Number one, developing personal awareness. Number two, educating yourself about the historical and socio-political realities of our nation, the policies that have been detrimental to many groups of people. And the other thing is intentionality, intention. It's very important for us to be very intentional about confronting racism and any of the other isms. We have a lot of isms in our society. Let's see. And Tony has a wonderful quote
Yes.
that he is going to share with us.
And I wanted to let everybody know I have mine. So
All right.
I got mine from the Multicultural Center, but I know you can buy them online. They can be expensive, but I don't know about the deal with nonprofits. But before we end, I wanted to leave you all with a quote, hopefully of inspiration. And all of you should know this. First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I'm not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews. I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. So just keep that in mind. Speak out. Our group talks about speaking out, not giving up, and making an impression. You all have the opportunity to do so. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you all have an opportunity to speak out. Remember Martin Luther King, an injustice anywhere, the threats of justice everywhere. So I encourage you, all of you, as well, all of you to stay in contact with me, and I'm sure the co-facilitators will say the same thing. Stay in touch. We all need to support each other through this. We all need to encourage each other. This will not end. Some of my group members were fearful this would end like other movements and so on and so forth. Remember, this is not a movement, it's a moment. We can make this impact for many generations to come. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tony. Danielle, did you want to say any last things?
I'm gonna keep it short and sweet because we're over time. So I've just enjoyed these conversations. I plan to move many of the things forward that we talked about in our session. And I hope that you all take the responsibility and accountability to move forward individually as well.
And we want to definitely stay in contact with all of you and see about moving forward with this. Thank you. Please look at the resources, read them. Also, if you have questions, you can reach out to any of us that are facilitators. Thank you so much. We thank you, everyone, for being in our sessions over the past 4 weeks. Thank you very much.
Keep an eye out for what's next. And also remember there are 2 events coming up this weekend. I don't know if Kyle wants to speak on that briefly.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle. He did in our group. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, there's an event set for August 15th at 3:30 at the Zanesville Civic League Community Center. It's a back to school community drive-through event. We have some local candidates that will be canvassing that will be on your ballot in Muskingum County. And we also have several organizations that will also be canvassing and distributing information of useful resources that will be offered amidst this pandemic. It's going to be a pretty interesting event because it's kind of new and it's creative, and we have a lot of adult allies and young adults working on this. So I hope to see you guys there. 928 Jackson Street. I can put my email in the group chat if anyone's interested in further information. Just contact me.
And Anita, do you want to tell them about the event also the Gantt House are doing this weekend in regards to the fair being canceled for the youth?
Okay, I was just going to jump in on that. Yeah, since the fair is canceled, we are having a fair at the Gantt House. It's a drive-through where school supplies, different items will be handed out to families, to students. I don't know, I haven't been in all of those meetings, but we certainly want you to come by. It's right after the event at the community center. So when you leave the community center, come on by the Gantt Foundation, and it's in the back. You just drive down the driveway in the back of the Gant House, and that's where everybody will have the things set up for you to drive through and get the things that are being donated and offered.
Do you need any extra supplies, Anita?
We probably do.
Okay.
We're handing out school supplies,
Cotton candy.
cotton, yeah. What else,
Just
Tony?
what you need, sugar amped kids.
And we're handing out coloring
Anita?
books, Nelson T. Gant coloring books as well.
Yes, Nelson T. coloring books.
Is there somebody to call to see if what they need donated?
Patsy
Patsy
McDonald.
McDonald.
Patsy, okay.
You could either let me know or Patsy McDonald will see that. Do you have her number?
Yeah, I have her number.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you so much.
Anita, I didn't know if, I'm kind of putting them on the spot, if Brian or Meg wanted to say anything since this is still the final session. If you don't, that's okay.
Oh,
But
yes, definitely, Brian and Meg.
Meg, if you
Right over who's going first.
have anything?
I just thank you, and I look forward to continuing the work. And this is not the end, so that's all I'll say. And good night. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to our partners, of course, United Way, the library, and Nelson T. Gant Foundation. One of the things that we believe very strongly at the Community Foundation, and I think all four of these organizations, is community collaboration. And if there's any idea or any thought or anything you think we can assist you in doing to help advance these community collaborations and make it a stronger, better place for everyone in Southeast Ohio, please reach out to us. We're always looking for ideas. And I will say, sadly, sometimes our phone doesn't ring, and we want to do things to make our community better. So please tap us as a resource. We all want to collaborate and work together to do things to make our community great, like I said. So please use us. We're here for you. We're your organizations.
And just one last thing too. Amy mentioned about Surge. They have a chapter in Columbus and Athens. I've been to some of the meetings in Athens. They are dynamic. But if you don't want to drive all the way to Athens or Columbus, talk to Amy, some of the other people in that group, and let's get a group started here in Zanesville.
Absolutely.
All right.
I want to thank you, Anita. Can we say thank you, Anita, for your work in this and all the sponsors. It's been a great opportunity for a community conversation. Really appreciate you. Applaud. Let's give them a hand. All the sponsors, the board sponsors, and our community surely appreciate you. Thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone.